From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Tiger Cats Game Day with Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly.
Welcome to Tiger Cats Game Day presented by Tiffany Gate Fresh Gourmet on the Ticats Audio Network. It is week 6. And the Hamilton Tiger Cats are traveling to Commonwealth tonight to play against the Edmonton Elks, the 0-5 Elks, the 1-3 Ticats. It will be a clash to remember. 9 p.m. kickoff, and to get y'all primed and ready for the game. This is Courtney Stephen along with my man Mike Daly. And as always, when we kick this thing off, Mike, I want you to set the table for the listeners back in Hamilton and tell us how this game fits into the season that we are experiencing right now as Hamilton Tiger Cat fans.
I like how you put that. The season we're experiencing right now. Listen, no matter what happens, it's always easier to do any football job with the Ticats after a win, right? You always want to talk about, you want to coach off of a win, you want to learn off of a win, you want to do Ticats game day off of a win. It's so much better, and that's what they got last week with Ottawa and squeaked one out. Yeah, absolutely, but a win's a win. And now to flip around on a short week and head out to Edmonton, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough on the legs, tough on the recovery, right, Corey? You remember those short weeks, man. It's not easy to do, right? People are a little bit banged up from that game, especially a close one with Ottawa like that. And I'm sure Chris Edwards a little bit more on that last hit, right, on the last play to save the game, right? But that short week turnaround, Court, it's pretty tough, man, especially when you're traveling out west and sitting on an airplane. How did you deal with that as a player? Because I know everybody dealt with it a little bit different, but with the game prep, not really there as much, right? Mental more so.
Well, for me, it was all about getting to the stadium and getting on my routine while we had those amenities, because, you know, at your home base, you've got the nice cold tubs, you've got the nice hot tub, you got the shower you're comfortable with, you got your own locker that has all of the toiletries and stuff you're used to. You can hop upstairs, get your film session in. You can stay a little bit later to try and make up time. But when you head on the road, first of all, getting on that flight, your legs are going to get a little tight. So when you get off, you better have your kit prepared. You better get that foam roller out. You better have your bands, do some stretches, hop in that shower the night before the game, get a little steam going, because it's about getting to the game fresh. Ultimately, that's what it's about. Teams on a short week, the one advantage is you're not going to install a ton and you're not going to be overloaded with information. But what you really do have to do is go back through what you brought to the last game plan and iron out kinks. So in some respects, you're streamlining the learning for that game because you're not dumping a ton in. You're really just hammering out the kinks and going back to it with your best stuff. So I think, you know, it's better to have a short week in week 6 as opposed to week 16. And these guys are pros. As soon as the lights come on and they kick that thing off, all that good juju, all that motivation, all the adrenaline will kick in, and I don't know, all those tightness and soreness will go away. So we'll be seeing an Edmonton team fighting for their first win, trying to break that what's the opposite of illustrious? Trying to break that 19 game losing streak that dates back over 1,000 days since their last win at home. And the Ticats, who are trying to generate some momentum, because, you know, 1-3, it's not where you envisioned yourself at this point in the season, but, you know, you're one game ahead of Ottawa now. And after this Edmonton game, you got a string of division battles. So to bring one back from the West would be huge. Ticats coming off a dramatic win. That energy has got to carry into this one. So let's talk about what else is carrying into this one, because I think there's a few lineup changes that could be interesting to look at for the Ticats. One of which would be Tyrone Riley coming back into play at that left tackle. So that bumps Kemp back out to the right tackle. And all of a sudden, we've got a Ticats offensive line that looks really familiar with David Beard, Coulter Woodmansey, and of course, Brandon Revenberg rounding it out. Does that give this team a lift or what?
It has to, right? And listen, the thing that stood out to me the most last game was the Ticats sticking to the run game. You know how we talked about every team has, after 3 games, they have all the stats, all the percentages on 1st and 10. They run and 5 receiver sets where 5 receivers are out there on the field and only 1 running back. They run the ball 33% of the time, right? Everybody has those stats. Well, the Ticats took those stats last game, flipped them on their heads, right? Gave James Butler the ball time after time after time. Matt Schultz running the ball as well. And now to get this O-line that, you kind of envisioned being the starting group back and ready to go, that's only going to now benefit this Ticats offense that seems to have stuck to the run this last game. Now, only 1 game isn't a consistent effort, and it'd be interesting to see how they do in Edmonton here. But to come into this game after riding a little bit of that momentum and really not miss too much in terms of, guys getting banged up and having to sit out for this game or whatever, they're kind of rolling into this game with a lot of the similar looks. And then a couple pieces, like you said, with Riley back and especially Lawrence Woods now at field corner, which is a very interesting conversation because, Court, we talked about it. He's just playing field corner now, right? He's not doing the return duties because we saw the speed that number 35, that hadn't had the speed before, but now does with McAllister. He's in there. He's in there. And I liked how he, especially on a couple of his punt returns, how he started hitting them. So I'm very curious to see how that balance of Lawrence Woods only playing field corner now and McAllister taking on a little more of those return duties and, like you said, keeping those legs fresh for either side of that ball that they're going to look at.
Yeah, Tyreek McAllister did his best Mike Daly impersonation last week. He turned on the burners. It was amazing. But you know what? That is a great point to underscore for everybody who's watching. We spoke about splitting the duties and doing double duties when you're a full-time starter and you're a feature returner. It's tough because that's high exertion every time you step on the field on a special teams play. And if you're a corner, it could be a run play, but you get ran off the ball 2 times in a row, 40 yards down the field. You're going to be gassed before you even touch the rock on special teams. So for Lawrence Woods, a guy who showed great promise in the preseason and in training camp, that 1 week to sit back, observe things, that can do a lot for his development as a defensive back. And just watching things and soaking them in, slowing the game down a little bit further, 1 week at a time. I wouldn't be surprised if he came in and had his best game of the year, a little bit fresher legs, a little bit more of his football IQ continuing to develop there. That would be awesome. But, Tyreek McAllister, hey, let him focus on doing what he does best because we can talk about this more as we go. But it seems as though the Ticats are going to require the explosive play if they want a chance to continue to win games until they get a more rhythmic thing going in the red zone. They got down to the red zone last week a couple of times, weren't able to punch it in for touchdowns. And I think until that's on command, guys like Tyreek McAllister are going to be critical in helping the Ticats win games. So before we jump back over to the offense, Jared Hewitt, okay, he was a guy who was up for the first time last week. Now he's getting the start at defensive end. He's a new guy. And he's right in the mix with that defensive line that, was wreaking havoc last week. So what do you think of this move?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because now when I look at it and I, see all the little letters beside the depth chart and you start trying to understand the intricacies of the CFL and the ratio rules and the designated Americans, what I look at it as is they're going to start one Canadian, which is Teddy Laurent, right? So, and start means the first play of the game, right? Like that's what it means. That shows on the depth chart. They have to have a certain amount of Canadians out there. There are things called designated Americans who can come in for Canadian players. And what I anticipate happening here is that guys like Jagarrett Davis, who is now this designated American player because he's played on the same team for 3 or more years, he's been in the league for 5 or longer, he can now come in for a Canadian player. So that means Ted Laurent, who is starting at tackle, well, Hewitt can move over and play inside like we saw him play last week. And then Jagarrett comes out onto the end, which then gives 4 American players to go rush the passer, which in this game, especially from the Ottawa game, right, where we saw a quarterback come in and run the ball very well, right? And not even designated run plays where it's a designed run for the quarterback. It's just pass plays and he escapes. This D-line is going to have to do a better job than they did against Crumb from Ottawa, the new guy. Like, geez, it's a new quarterback every week, but they're going to have to do a better job against Taylor Cornelius because Taylor Cornelius can roll. He is fast. He's tall, long legs, strider, but he can roll, and he has kind of sparked that Edmonton offense with the run. So I'm really going to look to this D-line, who now is going to play the little designated American game that we just talked about, to try to hem Cornelius in and make him be a passer and kind of keep this Edmonton offense struggling, right? Because against Ottawa, that was where once Mazzoli went down, which was heartbreaking, Court, I'm sure you and I are both on the same page there. But once Mazzoli went down, that's where Ottawa found most of their offense, and I guarantee you Edmonton is looking at that on the short week saying, how can we exploit that against the Ticats defense?
Yeah, and, their offense has left a lot to be desired. I mean, it's not as though the Ticats were lighting it up on the scoreboard, but Edmonton's offense, 12.4 points per game, averaging 264 yards net offense. Both of those are good for 9th in the CFL. So although they've got names like Stephen Dunbar Jr. and Kyron Moore on the offense, it's not really striking fear into the hearts of defenses, but knowing that they got a guy like Stephen Dunbar Jr., 1,000-yard receiver last year over there, the Ticats defense, they can't fall asleep, and it's going to be crucial that they continue to make it tough for Taylor Cornelius to make throws and give guys in the back end for that Ticats D opportunity to have some tips and overthrows, because we see what happens when they do get their hands on balls. They're opportunistic, they make plays, and they seem to come in bunches. It's as if, somebody just turned on the faucet last week. One big play led to the next, and they finally started to get things turned around as far as generating some momentum from defensive plays that turned into points and turned into field position. So interesting things developing, and I appreciate you breaking down that, level 3. That's almost like a master's class in roster building in the Canadian Football League with that move from Jared Hewitt, the three-way move with Ted Laurent and Jaguar Davis. Very interesting. I'll keep an eye out for that. Let's hop over to the other side. Let's talk about the Ticats offense and see, just talk about what they did last week. I thought it was very encouraging the way they started the game. They seemed like Matt Schultz was throwing on rhythm. Receivers were catching the ball. They were getting first downs. They were moving the chains. But a similar story, they got all the way down the field, didn't punch it in the way that you would have anticipated they would, just based on the 8 or 9 plays that they strung together to start the game. Like, they looked great, but they came out and they had 3 field goals in the first half. Is that something that they're going to be able to continue doing in winning games, or who's going to be the person to change that for the Ticats?
Yeah, I think, luckily this next game against Edmonton, the game last week, it's 2 struggling teams against Ottawa and Edmonton. I think when you start looking at the better teams in the CFL, you're not going to win with field goals very consistently, right? Like the defense can step up and hold some good offenses to, low scoring games, but not often in the CFL, right? It just doesn't happen against these good teams, these really high efficient offenses. So these Ticats, they do need to start scoring in the red zone, right? And it almost seems like we're just repeating ourselves from last year, because that was kind of the struggle as well. I remember talking about it. So there's really no, it's hard to pinpoint the fix in the red zone, right? It's not like you're running too many different plays, but what it does stand out to, Court, because in the middle of the field, there is so much space. The DBs are worried about being top down, making sure there's no explosions, the big type of plays, right? The big bomb plays over their heads. But once it gets to that red zone, defenses feel a little bit more comfortable because they have an out of bounds behind them in the back of the end zone. So now instead of having to defend a field that's 60 yards long, 70 yards long, make sure everything's in front of you, opening up all those underneath windows for the receivers. Everybody on defense is a little tighter in that red zone. All that means to me, Court, is that somebody needs to be more competitive on that offense to go and win battles, win one-on-one battles, just be better than the other guy in front of you, because there are going to be tighter windows. There are going to be jump balls, situations like that where you just need to be better on that play than the guy that's against you. And when I think of that, I think of a guy like Duke Williams, right? Maybe he becomes that big body red zone target, right? Maybe this offensive line can start moving bodies a little bit more for James Butler to pound it in. And maybe a little bit more quarterback run with Matt Schultz down there. Because one thing that makes this difficult, and we talked about it with Ottawa, we talked about it with Edmonton, when the quarterback gets involved with running, all the defensive schemes are developed around the quarterback not running. So you essentially have a one extra player in that free safety. As soon as that quarterback's involved in a run, now you can't be playing that one extra on defense, and it's really just man for man on offense and defense. So get some good matchups.
Totally. And, speaking about, just the way that the offense fits into the flow of the game, in the first few games, the first 3 games, the Ticats gave up 45 points off turnovers. And not to mention, they were losing going into the second quarter of every game that they were in. So in the last game, they were winning 3-0 going into the second, and they gave up 0 points off turnovers. And both of those things equate to them having the freedom and the ability to run the ball more, the ability to use their full playbook to get down into the red zone. And, Mark Leggio, he's been perfect since he's been here. So there's a little bit more confidence that once you get down, maybe you would start to open up that playbook and call a little bit of a variety of plays that you haven't called before, because there's been a little bit uncertainty. So if they can keep those trends up, I think those also support exactly what you're saying. Draw something up for Duke. That's not a typical play that you're going to see between the two 20s, but something you're only going to see once you get down near the goalposts or in the shadow of the end zone. So, if the defense holds down their end of the bargain, they put the fire out like we talked about. And if the offense could get some momentum early that allows the full playbook to stay at their disposal, I think absolutely we could see a little bit more of that. So let's talk about, who's the key players in this game that we got to keep an eye on. We've talked about return game. We talked about DBs. We talked about the pass rush, quarterbacks running the ball. But what are some matchups that in this game are going to have a big impact?
Yeah, the first one I look at is, okay, so last weekend you and I kind of pumped Richard Leonard up, right? And look at the game he had. He lit it up. Like, he kind of broke that game open, right? Had a pick. Also jumped that dig route on Ackland to pop the ball up for Simone, right? I know he wished he had that back and actually just caught that ball himself. But hey, somebody else gets it, so all good, right? But he lit it up. So now what I'm looking for is the new addition, Court, and I cannot wait to say this guy's name and be able to, put a couple good plays behind him, is Javian Elliott, right? And when we talk about Stephen Dunbar Jr., Ticat fans know what he can do because he did it for the Ticats last year. So that'll be the matchup I'm looking for this week, because, when an offense is struggling like Edmonton, they're going to go to their best players, and they have Eugene Lewis who is out, right? So they're going to look to Stephen Dunbar Jr. to go make some plays. So I'm looking for Javian Elliott to kind of hopefully have a game close to like a Richard Leonard, and then start piling on those turnovers and, the takeaways for the defense. How about you? Who are you looking for?
Well, that I would have to agree with you first before even going any further. Stephen Dunbar is a guy who I think he's a great route runner. I think his physical stature makes you automatically think of him as like a speed and a hands guy who can catch things and run away from folks. But he really does run all the routes, and I think they use him to run all of the routes. So he'll have his opportunity, and he'll be somewhat of a security blanket for Taylor Cornelius as he's running around. Last week, Edmonton gave up no sacks, and we know that the Ticats really broke the game open on their defensive line. And so I'll be interested to see if they're going to get to him, he's going to try and extend the plays. Could it be to his detriment? Are they going to be able to contain on that mobile quarterback? You know, it had to be a point of emphasis in the meeting room. If they did walkthroughs, you know, they put in some drills or some visualizations of just saying, this is what he likes to do. This is where he likes to escape. And, you know, quarterbacks escape different ways. They're either going to roll out to their passing arm. They could spin out and reverse pivot and go backwards the opposite way, or they can step up through the B gaps through the line. And each person on the defensive line has a lane when they rush. Will they be able to stay disciplined and stay in their lanes and rush together? You know, the defensive linemen, when they get a sack, only one person gets the stat, but you know it from just being in those meeting rooms. It takes all four to rush together. And if the Ticats can do that, it will put pressure on that passing game and also on that running game. You stop the run on the way to the quarterback. And so that will be very interesting. Other players looking to break out. I know Tyreek McAllister is a guy I'm very excited to see. Like I said, I think they are going to have to rely on the home run a little bit. Not that they're going to be swinging for the fences every play, but there's going to be times that I think somebody's going to have to give a little extra effort. Or if a defensive back on Edmonton takes a poor angle, you have to make them pay. If somebody commits a penalty and extends a drive, you have to get points off of that. When there's a door open, you got to kick it all the way in if you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But Tyreek McAllister, was it luck? Was it beginner's luck? Or is he going to be able to replicate what he did last week? Are you looking at him? Who else are you going to be watching closely in this game?
Yes, so two people on the Ticats offense that I want to look at, and one is Tyrone Riley coming back, because the guy across from him, AC Leonard, had 3 sacks last week, and this guy's just an ultra athletic defensive end, right? He is all over the place. He's tough to deal with. So I'm very curious to see how they can put up with him, because he's probably one of the toughest guys to deal with on that Edmonton defense, right? Can kind of wreck a game, just like we talk about with, you know, Malik Carney's kind of popped into that type guy, and Jagarrett Davis, we know him as that, right? Those guys that kind of ruin drives, ruin quarters because of how well they can play. But where I'm really focused on is we have seen Duke Williams and Tim White have breakout games, a couple games back to back, right? We saw Tyreek McAllister have a good game last week with Richie Sindani, a bunch of catches, kind of that first down weapon. I want to see Terry Godwin have one of those games now. I'm just kind of waiting for, okay, this is the Terry game. You know what I mean? Tim White's had a couple of those, Duke's had a couple of those, Sindani, McAllister. I want to see this one be the Terry Godwin game. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and you know what? He did have that outstanding catch when they played in Toronto, but it would be good to see him have one of those in the place where you get 6 points for bringing it in. I think, you know, honorable mention to Richie Sindani, who was 7 catches on 8 targets, and the only incompletion was arguably a catch in the back of the end zone over a defender's head, survived contact with the ground, but then the ball was knocked out after the fact. I think that was one of his games to say, you know what, Hamilton, I am as advertised. I'm here and I'm here to make plays. So, you know, all of those things, they feed on each other, and it's just momentum, and you find it in other little places here, there, and everywhere. And when you get that going, when everybody starts walking in stride together, man, that's a tough team to beat. But hey, before they can get there, before we can talk about them all being in stride, got to kick that thing off, and you got to just start with the first play. Kick it in bounds, Legio. Give them a chance. In Edmonton tonight at Commonwealth Stadium, 9 p.m. Eastern, it is the 0-5 Edmonton Elks trying to break their 19-game losing streak against our 1-3 Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are as fired up as they've been in a long time. Mike, I'm ready for this one. Are you ready?
I'm ready, man. I would love to see that home losing streak continue.
You and I both, man. And if you aren't going to be all the way out in Alberta, you can tune in on the Ticats audio network. That's listen.ticats.ca. This was Tiger Cats Game Day presented by Tiffany Gate Fresh Gourmet. My name is Courtney Stephen from Mike Daly. We hope you have a great game day. Peace.
It's game day and you're ready. So are we. Let us know your thoughts. Email us at gameday@ticats.ca. Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly are here every game day with their insights into today's game. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.